Do you feel frustrated, unprepared, confused, or lost? Well, it's time to be happy because Geography World Channel is here to help. I see the comments and requests and I will act on them. Please remember to follow Geography World Channel on Instagram and Facebook using the link shown on the screen. Please remember to like, share with your friends, and subscribe. For person wishing to contact me privately, you may email me at geographyworld100@gmail.com. The link will be posted below. Welcome back to Geography World Channel. Now for today's video, we'll be looking at the human section on the 2016 May-June Geography CSEC paper. Now the first thing that you're seeing on question 5 is a table, and it shows the annual growth of a Caribbean town between the year 1985 to 2016. So this is the table with the year and the population data. Now part A asks that on the grid provided, you are to complete a line graph to illustrate the data in the table. So your line graph should include a title and the vertical and you should label the vertical axis. I'm going to show you how your line graph should look. So this is how your line graph should look. Now, if you look on your vertical axis, you realize that you're not seeing thousands, just these figures. So what you'd have to do is that you'd have to label your vertical axis to say population per 1,000. So the 20 here represent 20,000, the 40,000. So you label the vertical axis as population per 1,000, and then you plot your points. Now I went ahead and I did it. So for 1985 is 5,000, 1997 is 73,000, 2006 it is 94,000, and for 2016 it is 160,000. After labeling it, you need to insert your title, which is annual growth rate or annual growth for a Caribbean town between 1985 and 2006. Do it just like this and you should be awarded your 4 marks. Section B asks us to define the term urbanization. Now, urbanization is the growth in the proportion of individuals living in towns and cities. Let me read again. Urbanization is the growth in the proportion of individuals living in towns and cities, and that's where 1 mark. Now you're to outline 3 reasons for rural to urban migration in the Caribbean. 3 reasons why persons move from the rural areas to the urbanized areas. So 3 push factors, right? Or pull. So employment opportunities. Persons migrate from the rural area because of the lack of jobs to the urbanized areas in search of jobs because of employment opportunities that are offered in the urban areas. They also move from rural to urban because of educational opportunities, right? So yes, there might be schools in the rural areas, but they may not offer the programs that persons want to do. So they oftentimes have to move from the rural areas to the urban areas for educational purposes. Health opportunities are health purposes. Some of the procedures that are required may not be offered in a rural area. The person have to migrate to the urban area in order to seek health care, right? And we also can look at the recreational opportunities, right? Our rural area might not have the recreational activity that will entice somebody, so they'll have to go to the urbanized area to basically participate in that recreational activity. So once you're able to just list 3, the 3 marks is yours. Part 3 of the question asks that you describe 2 measures that have been used to control the rate of urbanization in the Caribbean. Now in the Caribbean, what they use to control urbanization is that they basically develop new towns. So for example, in Jamaica, our urban center, Kingston, was becoming it was so overly populated that they had to basically develop new towns. So for example, Spanish Town and Portmore, those towns were developed as a way of basically controlling the rate of urbanization in Kingston. They also try to decentralize development, meaning they spread the commercial and industrial activities to other parishes, right? So back then, if you wanted, let's say you wanted to do an operation on your kidney, you could only go to Kingston to get that operation done. It was not offered in rural areas or the other parishes. But now, because of decentralized development, a lot of the things that were once in the urban areas are now a part of other parishes. So you have an option if you want to do it within your parish or you want to go to the urban area. Another is that they have sustainable tourism. So this is where they try to promote heritage and ecotourism, and they do it because they're trying to conserve the rural environment while providing jobs for persons, right? So instead of tourists coming to the urban areas, they try to promote heritage and ecotourism so that persons become interested and go to the rural areas to basically just look at nature, learn a little bit about the culture of the rural areas, right? And this will, in a sense, provide jobs for persons in the rural areas. Thus, they don't have to migrate to the urban areas to basically cause overcrowding. Now, question C, part 1, it asks that with reference to specific Caribbean examples, we explain how any two of the following factors influence population distribution. Remember now, population distribution is basically how the persons are spread out over the land. Now we talk about natural vegetation, right? Areas that are usually heavily populated with vegetation are usually sparsely populated with people, while areas that are sparsely populated with vegetation are often ideal choices for populations to settle or persons to settle. So in other words, the more trees and vegetation in an area, the less persons you will find, but the clearer the land, the more persons you will find settling in that area. As it relates to the presence of minerals, areas that are usually rich in minerals, they often encourage the development of settlements. So for example, Mandeville, Jamaica, right? Mandeville, St. Elizabeth, it has bauxite. Now, when Alpart Mining Company basically developed, it basically aided with the settlement, right? The settlement of individuals in that area, because the persons who worked at Alpart at the time, nobody wants to live in Kingston and travel from Kingston to St. Elizabeth every single day. The distance would be too far and you'll get tired and a lot of things can go wrong. So what happened is that because of the type of job and the location, this basically helped to motivate persons to develop a settlement around the plant, right? So that's how the community of Nain basically developed. When we talk about soils, now individuals, they tend to live in areas that are porous. So persons tend to settle on flat, well-drained land. Swampy or poor drained areas are often sparsely populated. And when we talk about soil again, we talk about the fertile soil. Now, fertile soil, they're often densely populated because those soils are very rich and ideal for farming and agricultural purposes, while the infertile soil, they are usually sparsely populated. Now, for a named Caribbean territory, you're to explain two ways in which its relief influences population density. Now, population density is basically higher closer to the town because of the flat and the undulating land, which are ideal for settlement, right? Now, countries' capital in the Caribbean are usually located along the coast, and this is because the coastal areas are relatively flat, while the interior of most islands are hilly or mountainous, and these are the areas that are usually sparsely populated. Now, in the volcanic islands like Montserrat, the foot of the volcano, they are sparsely populated, but along the coastal area where it is flat, you will realize that the population is very dense. When you get your map for your map reading exam, whichever island you get, you can look at the map right along the coast, and you will see that right along the coast it is very, very densely populated. And once you look inland or the interior of the island, you realize that it is very, very sparsely populated. Question 6 shows us a table. Now, the table represents data that basically shows the distribution of the labor force in St. Lucia, and this is showing us based on the economic activities. Now, in the first column, we have the different types of economic activities. The second column, we have the size of the labor force, and this is in percentage. And in the third column, we have the size of the sector, and this is in degrees. Now, let us go down to the first question. Now, on the insert provided, you are to complete the pie chart to show the distribution of the labor force in each economic activity. So the pie chart that is given is down here. So based on the information presented above, you are to create a pie chart for it. Now, in order for you to create the pie chart, you have to use the size of the sector, the one in degrees. So you have to use the third column data to create the pie chart. Remember that the pie chart, it goes up to 360 degrees. So you have to use this one to create the pie chart. Now, when you're finished, your pie chart should look like this. However, you can add color to your pie chart, so you can color it, and you can also put in the percentage or the sector. And remember that your pie chart, it must have a title. So it's pie chart showing the distribution of the labor force in St. Vincent according to economic activity. So you can put in the percentage or the sector. Question B, part 1, asks us to define the term primary economic activity, and you're to include an example in your definition. Now, when we talk about primary economic activities, these are the activities that involve the using of natural resources such as the extraction of minerals from the earth, fishing from the sea, forestry, and agriculture from the land, right? So primary economic activities, they involve no change in the natural resource and no processing takes place. Part 2, of question B asks us to explain the role of 3 factors in the development of the tourism industry in the Caribbean. Now remember that the Caribbean is basically the tourism hub for the world. So these are a few of the factors that basically aided in the development of the tourism industry. So for example, the geographic location. Now remember that the Caribbean is ideally located to attract tourists from North and South America. And because the Caribbean is basically accessible by air and water, so we have major airports and docks, so it is pretty easy for tourists to get to the Caribbean. Another factor is climate. Now remember that in the Caribbean we experience a warm tropical climate with the temperatures averaging 28 degrees Celsius throughout the year. Thus, persons in the colder region, they tend to come to the Caribbean as an escape route to escape the harsh winter condition. Remember our physical features, our sun, and the sea, right? So the sun, it aids in the tropical marine climate that we have, giving us that warm temperature all year round. The sun, we have coral banks that basically aid in the development of the white sand beaches with gentle breaking waves. And the sea that we have clear crystal water. Remember that we also have waterfalls, we have natural vegetation. Remember that the Caribbean has its own unique culture, and because of our unique culture, it pulls tourists to the region. So you can basically just explain any three of these factors and you should get your 6 marks. Question C, part 1 asks us to explain 3 ways in which tourism benefits Caribbean economy. Now, tourism in the Caribbean is very, very beneficial because it creates jobs, thus reducing poverty in the Caribbean. It basically contributes and it helps us to earn foreign exchange. It helps the government to earn government revenues. Now, how this is done is that tourism contributes to government revenues through taxes on hotels, department taxes, restaurant license, and head tax. So all of these taxes basically help the government to earn the government revenues. Now, tourism also fosters development of other sectors. So, for example, tourism encourages the agricultural sector in the country to grow because if you're going to operate a hotel, you're going to need food to basically supply your tourists when they come. So it basically helps with the development of other sectors, and it also has investment from other countries. So because of our strategic location and what we have to offer, we have a lot of overseas investors who want to invest in our country and our tourism sector. Now, part 2 asks us to explain 3 challenges faced by the tourism industry in the Caribbean. Now, even though there are a lot of advantages and benefits to tourism, we do have a few challenges as well. Now, the major one is that we have competition from other global destinations. Now, even though the Caribbean is deemed the ideal location for a vacation, we do have other locations in the world that has that same reputation. So the competition, it is real, right? So we have a lot of competition from other global destinations, some cheaper, right? Some more accessible, right? And with tourism comes social issues. So we have a lot of social issues rising. So for example, we have a lot of crime and violence linked around the tourism industry. We have pollution. So we have a lot of social issues arising due to the tourism industry. Now remember that the tourism industry is usually seasonal, where we have a lot of tourists during the summer period and during the Christmas period, right? Now that is seasonal, right? So some of the employment opportunities within the tourism industry, they are usually seasonal, and that's a challenge, right? So when it's not the tourist season, a lot of persons are unemployed. Now, tourists, they basically cause a lot of damage to our natural resources. So, for example, when they go diving, they break off a piece of the corals, right? So they cause damages to our natural resources. And because we constantly are in the process of trying to meet the needs of tourists, they want adventure park. We're going to cut down millions of trees and we're going to build adventure parks. Tourists, they want swimming pool. We're going to get swimming pool for them. All of the activities that we're doing in order to get tourists to come to our destination is basically contributing to climate change. And remember that climate change is something that has very devastating effects, right? We're trying to get tourists to come while we're damaging the environment and the atmosphere. So another major disadvantage to the tourism industry is that it basically causes or it's linked to climate change. Question 7 shows us a table that presents the value of banana exports in millions of US for 2 Caribbean countries in 1990 and 2003. So the countries are St. Vincent and Dominica, and these are the amount of banana, the money collected for banana in millions in 1990 and 2003. No, this is the graph that you are to draw. You are to use to construct the bar graph. So your question is that it instructs you to use the data shown above to construct a bar graph to illustrate the data. Good. So you're to include a title and you're to label the vertical axis. Now, this is how your bar graph should look. I've used the blue to represent the 1990 data and the green for the 2003 data. So along your vertical axis, you need to label, so it's the amount in US dollars or the value in US dollar. I've placed the St. Vincent and the Dominica to show which one I'm actually representing on the bar. This is pretty important, and you have to give your graph a title. The value of banana exported in millions for St. Vincent and Dominica in 1990 and 2003. Please try to get your bar graph constructed as neat as possible and as accurate as possible so that you can get maximum marks. Let us look at part B, question 1. You're to state 4 characteristics of large-scale arable farming in the Caribbean. Now, a few of the characteristics that large scale is basically the same as commercial farming, and once you're doing commercial or large scale farming, it is usually done on flat land in the Caribbean. So it's usually done on extensive amount of relatively flat land. Monoculture is practiced, meaning that they only focus on one main crop. So if they're doing sugarcane or they're doing coffee or they're doing banana, it's usually one main crop. And we can look at the climate, right? You can look at the temperature and the rainfall of the region. You can look at the soil, right, to see if the soil is fertile, the fertility of the soil. And we can look at the different types of labor used. Do they use human labor or do they use machineries? So you can look at some of these you can list a few of these characteristics. Good. Part B asks us to describe the characteristics of peasant farming in the Caribbean using any two of the following headings. So, for peasant farming, this is usually farming done on a very small scale. So you can look at the size of the plot. Now, whenever persons are doing peasant farming, the plots are usually less than 10 acres, right? So once it is 10 acres or more, it's not classified as peasant farming anymore. Once it is less than 10 acres, though, it is classified as peasant farming. Some literature, however, will tell you that peasant farming goes up to 5 acres. Now, when you talk about the labor supply, in peasant farming, the labor supply is usually made up of family members. So family who live within the household, they are the ones who would go out and work on their farms. And usually when they're doing the reaping, they could pay 1 or 2 persons from the community to come and assist. But it is usually done mostly by family members. Now, as it relates to the location, peasant farming is usually done along the coastal plains and the hilly terrain, right? So peasant farming are usually done relatively close to the farmer's home, and they're usually done in some hilly areas or along the coastal plains. Now we talk about the farming practices. They plant many crops and they rear livestock as well. They use artificial manure, right? So they use the manure that comes from the animals. They do crop rotation and they use labor intensive methods and hand tools. So peasant farming is done on a small scale and they usually use family members and they practice the planting of many crops. All right, let's go to part C. We're to outline 2 reasons for the decline in importance of agriculture in the economy of the Caribbean countries. Now, back in the days, we know that agriculture was the dominant economic activity in the Caribbean. However, as time progressed, we realize that the importance of agriculture in the Caribbean has significantly decreased because young persons, honestly, they are not participating in or taking part in the agricultural field. Now, some of the reasons for the decline in agriculture is because of one, the market. Now, the market, it is a very competitive market out there. we from the Caribbean, we're so small that when we go against other countries on the international market, our products just are laughed at. We're so small in size. We're so small in size, right? Now we have other countries who are actually planting or growing the same things that we do. So it makes it a bit difficult for us to ascertain and keep a market, right? And some other countries, because they have the resources, they are able to better do their product and sell it at a cheaper rate than we in the Caribbean. So once we are able to produce the crops. However, because our prices sometimes seem to be a bit higher, we are unable to get the markets. Now, another thing is that the export policies. There are a lot of export policies that we have to follow in order to get our goods on the international market. Some of them have to do with money, right? So they have a lot of expenses to them, which makes it a bit difficult and discouraging for farmers. We also have the introduction of the new industries. Why become a farmer when you can sit at home and talk on the phone all day and make money? Why become a farmer where you can basically not get your hands dirty? You can just pick up clothes and put it in the machine, or you can just sell persons clothes. Why dirty up your hand to become a farmer where you can actually work in a factory? So because of the new industries, which is the secondary all the way up to the quinary sector, persons are opting not to get their hands dirty, but to work in the sector, the servicing sector, so that they can actually still make money while staying clean. Now, another reason why the agricultural sector in the Caribbean is failing is because of the lack of finance and investment. While the Caribbean has so much very well fertile soil, we have a lack of investment and lack of finances that are being pumped in the agricultural sector. So we are not motivated financially to actually participate in the agricultural sector. And you know that climate change is a big thing for the world. So climate change is significantly affecting the soil fertility, right? It is basically decreasing the agricultural sector in the Caribbean. Now, part two asks us to outline two similarities and two differences between large-scale commercial arable farming in the Caribbean and weed farming in the prairies of Canada under each of the following headings. So we're looking at farming practices and we're looking at market trends. Okay, so let's look at the similarities first. Now, in the Caribbean and the prairies of Canada, they both practice monoculture, meaning one main crop. They focus mainly on one main crop. So the prairies, they focus on wheat, and in the Caribbean, depending on where you're looking, they focus on sugarcane, or they focus on banana, right? So there's always one main crop. Now, another similarity is that it's done on relatively flat or undulating land. So the land is an area of extensive flat land. And another thing is that they use chemicals such as pesticides and herbicides to keep away the worms and the pests from destroying their crops. Now, those are farming practices. As it relates to the marketing trend, their crops are exported. So both Canada and the Caribbean, they export their crops, right? Now, as it relates to the differences, now Canada, they use very large machineries with limited work by hand, while the Caribbean uses few machineries and most human labor, right? So the Caribbean, we use a lot of human labor, while in Canada, the Caribbean, sorry, they use a lot of human labor, while in Canada they use a lot of large machineries to do the job. Another farming practice is that Canada, they do farming extensively, while in the Caribbean we participate in intensive farming. Canada, their farm usually extends to about 500 acres, while the Caribbean is done both on large and small scale. So the amount of farmland in the Caribbean, it differs, so it ranges. As it relates to the marketing strategies, in Canada, a lot of capital is being pumped into the wheat farming, while in the Caribbean, sugarcane industry only receive a minimal amount of investment, right? Now, the sugarcane is transported to the nearby processing factory, while Canada, it basically stores and transports to factories mile away. So when they reap the wheat in Canada, it is stored at a factory close by, but it is processed in a different factories miles away. So answer these questions, basically expound on the answers, and you should get your 8 marks pretty easy.
We are at the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and please remember to like, share, subscribe, and turn on your post notification bell in order to receive more videos like these. Leave comments below suggesting topics that you would want me to present on. In the comment section below, comment the name of your school and the territory for a shout out in my next video. Until then, bye!